Hello everybody, this is M Squared and I'm going to try and bring you a informational video about crew and strategy. Now there have been a lot of videos that have been made already about crew skills and what each of them do and how they play into the game. And I'm going to try not to go into that too much because there have already been quite a few videos made about the subject. And I think actually Gaijin has now improved the game where those crew skills, when you go into the crew menus, these are pretty well explained. So I'm not going to try and get too much into the technical details of that. But I did want to let you know that this is my first ever YouTube video. This is something that I decided to start with, something a little bit informational. I think the majority of the direction of this channel will probably be mostly gameplay. But this is something that I don't think has been quite addressed by many of the resources that are out there. Let me tell you how I do it, and then if you decide that that works better for you, then you might change your crew strategy. This is also something that's probably best aimed at beginners, because those people that are already kind of set in their crew strategy, reversing it doesn't always make a whole lot of sense. So if you're just starting out with crew skills, this might be a little bit more helpful to you. It might help you optimize how you use your crews and so forth. First thing is how the crew system works, and that's basically you have these slots down here. You see that I have 5 crew slots. And when you purchase a new plane, you need to train a crew on it, basically. So you have these 5 different crews, or I have 5 different crews. You actually start with 2 or 3. I can't remember. It's been such a long time. But when you buy a new plane, you decide which crew you want to assign it to for your battles. And then you have to pay Silver Lions in order to train them, in order to use the plane most effectively. Now you can train multiple crews on the same airplane, and that's fine, though that isn't always necessarily the best game economics decision that you can make. It probably makes more sense to pick a crew for an airplane and stick with it. Whenever you fly that airplane, fly it on that crew. Now, there are different permutations of airplanes that you can put into the game at one time. So these 5 crews, when I'm picking a battle rating that I want to fly at, or a certain plane that I want to fly at, sometimes some of the other planes that I want to include are not crewed up on these other crews. So I have to go ahead and pay extra money to train another crew if I want to have that crew involved in the combat. But first of all, let's start with the number of crews. And this is something that I think is kind of funny, because watching all these other YouTubers and stuff, they've got planes all the way down across here. I think the maximum per faction is 9 crews. And I think that's great, hey, sure, the more crews, the better, right? The more planes I can bring into combat. Well, not necessarily, for a couple of reasons. One, if you are primarily a realistic battle player, those extra crews aren't going to help you at all. You get to pick one plane that you're going to fly in that match. Now, in arcade, you can fly as many planes as you have crews. You get shot down in one, you drop into another one, and you fly away in that. So you can actually get killed up to 9 times in an arcade match. So you'll notice here that the 5th crew costs Golden Eagles. And I'm not a big fan of that. I mean, I have some Golden Eagles up here that I supported the game buying some of their packs and some of their premium airplanes. But the crews that you start with, the first 3 crews, those are just given to you. The second 2 crews you can buy with Silver Lions, and that's just free money that you earn by your performance in the game. And so I opted to crew out 2 more slots here, but I have not spent Golden Eagles on more crew, and I'll tell you why. Because I'm primarily an arcade player as far as airplanes go, and I know I can stack up my lineup with as many planes, but sometimes it's hard when you have that many crew slots to keep your battle rating within a certain range. So when you're flying out the P-40E, you have, unless you want to get bumped up into a higher battle rating, you have to stick with planes that are around that battle rating. And looking at the tech tree, I mean, Yeah, there's a few. There's the Hellcat, the TBF is a little bit under that. There are a few others, but otherwise you'll end up bringing a bunch of weaker planes into your match as well. So you'll have your Warhawk, you'll have your Hellcat, you'll have your P-36 Seahawk, so forth. And these are all pretty much right around 2.7 battle rating. But if you want to fill out these extra crew slots, you're going to be bringing in lower tier aircraft, which you may not even end up using if you don't get shot down. You may not end up using, or you'll bring it in and they'll be fairly ineffective according to the match that you've been put in. Or you end up up-tiering yourself where you say, all right, well, I've got room for the P-38G. Well, that's a 3.3 battle rating, so if I were to put that in this slot, I would be putting myself into a higher battle rating arcade slot, and that's not always desirable. The other thing is, too, that now with a lot of experience, you can see, up here by my rank, I've been playing this game for a little while. I have some experience with it. I'm a pretty good pilot. I'm a much better pilot than I was when I first started. But I found that even in arcade, now I only use probably 1 or 2, maybe 3 aircraft in an arcade match. And part of that is because I'm a little bit better pilot than I used to be, but part of that is also because of my style of flying. My style of flying is a little bit more defensive. I use more energy tactics. I try to avoid the fur balls. I nibble around the edges. So being actually, hit and killed and fired upon is kind of a rarity in my case. And you'll see that in subsequent videos in the way that I play. But with me being a little bit better at this game now, and with the style of play that I've adopted in most cases, I generally only go through a couple of airplanes. I don't usually need all 5 of those crew slots. But I like to have them there. I already have them, so I mean, you can send these on vacation if you want. To change the vehicle, I can actually, send them on holiday and dismiss them basically. But as long as I have them, I'll put airplanes in the lineup, because sometimes, this is sort of the second point that I want to make about crew slots, is that also because of the way I fly, I am not primarily a fighter pilot, I am not primarily a bomber pilot, I fly them all. I have most of these planes purchased, and if you'll notice, I have spades on just about all my planes. So I don't skip airplanes. Even when you're looking at, the Corsairs here, there's 2 of them embedded in here. I've flown both of those, and I've flown them enough to max out and get all the upgrades. If you look at my player card, you'll see I've got all but 5 of the American line maxed out. So I fly bombers, I fly heavy attackers, I fly dive bombers, I fly fighter planes, energy fighters, turn fighters, the whole thing. And that's across the board. That's all the different factions. Usually I finish up a plane and max it out completely, learn how to fly it before I move on to the next one. Now that may not be your style. So the reason why I like to have 5 crews is that I have 3 fighter crews generally. The first 3 are fighter crews. The second one is, or the fourth one is usually a dive bomber or heavy attacker type aircraft. And then the last one is a bomber. Now this A-20G is kind of a heavy fighter / bomber, but if I put the B-25 in the game, that's the slot that I'm going to put it in. And not only because it helps me kind of keep track of where my planes are and which crews, but I'll get into some specifics about why that is important to me to have fighter crews, dive bomber crews, and bomber crews. So before I get into that, the other thing that I wanted to get into was, so having a variety of planes to choose from at any given battle rating is probably a good idea. And I like to have all 5 of these crew slots because depending on how the way the battle is going, I might say, you know what, we've got 2 ground targets left and then we win the match and I just got shot down in my fighter, so you know what, I'm not going to spawn in another fighter, I'm going to spawn in a bomber, I'm going to swoop in, get those last 2 tank kills so that we can win the game. I've even been known to eject from a plane that I'm currently flying in order to fly a plane that is something that's more needed for the match that I'm playing. So I take them into battle. Whether I use them or not depends on how the battle is flowing. It depends on which planes I'm trying to upgrade. So if I didn't have my A20G fully upgraded, I'd probably be grinding on that a little bit, and I'd be flying that a little more often. But the advantages, when you're talking about crew skills, the advantages of having dedicated fighter, dive bomber, bomber crews is that each of these crew skills does different things. So the things that are important to a bomber aren't necessarily important to a fighter, and vice versa. And these crew skills really do make quite a difference in the gameplay. The higher your crew skills, the easier it is. You're going to have to identify enemies from further away. Your AI gunners are going to anticipate enemy movements better. They're going to fire more accurately. You're going to repair more quickly on the runway and in the hangar. It does make a difference. So don't just buy whatever because it really doesn't matter. Give it some thought as to how you're going to crew up each, how you're going to skill up each of your crews. So let's start with the fighters now. These I have pretty much maxed out. I think only one of these tabs isn't completely maxed out. And I'll tell you how I started in this game, and I was doing it a little bit wrong, or maybe let's say less optimal for fighter crews and bomber crews. And I can tell you now from my experience how I think the best way is, even though that isn't necessarily the way I did it at first. So starting with the fighter crews, I mean, you have these different tabs, pilot, gunners, ground service, qualification. Let's start with the pilot. With the fighter crews, that's going to be one of the two important areas that you're working with here. Keen vision, awareness. Again, I said I'm not going to get into the specifics. You see as you hover over, it gives you a little description of what each of those crew skills do. In a fighter plane, keen vision and awareness and G tolerance, stamina, vitality, those are all very important. Vitality keeps you from getting pilot sniped. You can maybe take a bullet and still fly the plane. Stamina affects your other skills. Keen vision, identifying airplanes from further away. Those are all very important to a fighter pilot. And the ground service, that includes your repair speed, your repair rank, which will affect your repair speed, your reload speed. This is the one that people are paying the most attention to usually, because after you jam your guns and you want to get a fresh load of ammo in there so that you can start fighting again, you don't want it to take too long. You might end up getting killed while you're trying to reload your guns. Weapons maintenance is usually neglected, but it is a very valuable one to keep your guns from jamming, keep your guns in good shape. So these are all important, I think, in fact, equally important to a fighter pilot. If you land on an airstrip, the difference between a 25-second repair and a minute and a half repair can make the difference between getting back in the game or getting a bomb dropped on you. So generally what I do for fighters is level these up sort of all the same. I don't concentrate on one. I don't neglect any of these. I level them up all very similarly. And this is probably a bad crew to see that, but maybe this crew, that one's kind of up there too. But you see, I'm not quite fully maxed out, but all of them are kind of at the same level, as well as the ground service. The repair rank is the only one that I've maxed out so far. We can look at some of these other ones. I think some of my Japanese crews need a little work. See right here, you're looking at 36, 72, 72. They're all about the same except the repair rank, because I've maxed all of those out. That was just a carryover from the previous, before they switched from the 20-tier system to the 5-tier system that we currently have. I had crewed up, and when it carried over, when they converted that, basically I was ranked 4 or 5 for almost all of my crews there. So I didn't level that up on purpose very quickly. That just kind of carried over from the previous releases of the game. Anyways, back to fighter crews. This one right here, this tab right here, you can ignore entirely. Actually, on this crew, I've got it, quite a bit. I've got my skills upgraded quite a bit, but that's only because I have everything else pretty much maxed out on this thing. If I go to this one, where I haven't quite maxed out all the important skills for fighter pilots, you'll see my gunners have 0. I have 1, which they give you. I didn't buy that one gunner, that experienced gunner that comes with the crew. But once I have all of these up there, and I don't have anything else to do with my XP, so I'll start leveling these up too. But it is not important at all for a fighter. So experienced gunners has nothing to do with single-seat fighter airplanes. Fire accuracy has nothing to do with how you're going to be able to shoot your Kitty Hawks guns. This is only for AI gunners, and those are gunners that are in other positions besides the pilot. So tail gunner, turret gunner, waist gunners, and so forth. This will affect those, and we'll get to that in a minute. So basically, for fighter pilots, ignore this tab altogether because it makes no difference at all. If you're using this crew specifically for fighter planes and nothing else, then you can ignore this. And what that means is now that you've specialized the fighter crew and you can ignore this tab, that means that you can spend more of your XP on these tabs so that when you're flying one of your fighters, you'll actually be better equipped to fly a fighter plane than if you had sometimes put a bomber here and you felt like you had to spend some of your XP on this tab. I hope that makes sense. But basically, I treat all 3 of these the same. They're fighter crews. They're for single-seat fighter aircraft. Now, this other crew over here, this is usually for dive bombers and heavy attackers. And most of those planes, including the TBF-1C, have 1 turret gunner. So I'm talking about planes. Well, actually, this one has 2 turrets. So I'm not really optimized for this particular plane. But the Beaufighter, the ME-410, Dauntless, I mean, all these dive bomber and heavy attacker aircraft, the IL-2, for instance. Now, they don't have a full complement of gunners like one of the heavy bombers or one of the medium bombers has. They usually have just 1 gunner. So the pilot skills are important here. The ground service skills are important here, but you can't ignore the gunner tab. See, I've actually put 2 gunners. I've paid to have another experienced gunner because I have some planes like these where I have more than 1 turret. You'll find that if you only have 2 experienced gunners, if I were to move the B-25 over to this slot, the B-25 has more than 2 gunners. And you'll find that your crew suffers. You'll actually see negative numbers here because you only have 2 experienced gunners where you have, a larger number of gunners that are necessary. So, but I'll tell you the truth. For those particular planes, we're talking about heavy attack aircraft, ME-410s, IL-2s, and so forth, dive bombers. I have found that their armament in the back is usually pretty lame. And the way I fly, I try not to get anybody on my tail. I mean, obviously that would be ideal, but I try not to dive into situations where I'm going to pick somebody up on my tail. Yes, it happens and so forth, and my AI gunners try to pick off the guy behind me, but I found that their armament is usually so weak that even having tail gunners back there that are crewed up just isn't as important to me as having some of these other things as fighter pilots. So I want the repair speed. I want the awareness. With dive bombers and heavy attackers, you don't necessarily need the G tolerance that you would for a fighter aircraft, but stamina and vitality, those are all good things to have. If I could do it over again, I probably would have crewed this up last. The only time I find myself using tail gunners on a heavy attacker is by some chance that somebody actually did get on my tail, which happens less and less as I get a little bit better and smarter with the game. But when they do, I tend to take over the turret gunner myself. And at that point, when it's not AI that's controlling your turret gun, none of these stats matter. This is only for computer-controlled gunners. So when you're doing it yourself, these don't benefit you at all. And I prefer to sort of take over the turret guns in my heavy attackers when necessary. So I would have left this blank and I would have crewed up some of my other things. In fact, I'm going to start doing that. Finish these up first before I start on this tab. But now we get to the bomber tab. Oh, also on the heavy attackers and the dive bombers, you'll find that this reload speed becomes a little bit more important, because it's not just the speed at which your machine guns reload, it's the speed at which your bombs reload. Of course, if we're playing in arcade battles, as I usually do, in realistic and simulator battles, you don't get to reload at all. So that's a good point, actually. If you are primarily a realistic or a simulator battle fighter, you should ignore this entirely. Now, sometimes you might jump into arcade and you'll wish you had leveled it up, but it's probably better to work on some of these other crew skills, since reload speed is irrelevant in those two battle modes. But then we get on to the bombers. Now, I have this one pretty much leveled out. Yeah, I've got it completely with the gunners and everything. That wasn't just from flying experience, but I actually spent some golden eagles to crew up my bomber crews, because I've got 3 tabs to work on here with the bomber crews. Now, I can tell you, after playing this game for a while, I can tell you what, I leveled them all up sort of at the same pace. And I can tell you now that if I were to do it again, I would do it differently. For one, the pilot tab is probably a little less important. Keen vision is nice and awareness is nice, so that you can see the enemies coming at you from a further distance. If you can see somebody coming from 6 kilometers away instead of 2.5 kilometers away, you can decide whether you want to start your dive now. Do you want to move to the west a little bit so maybe he can't see you? Do you want to dive for cover? Do you want to get more towards friendly aircraft before he's right on top of you? Those are all good things for bomber pilots to have. Stamina and vitality are also important, but I probably would have ignored G tolerance entirely. I mean, think of it. When you have a medium bomber or you have a heavy bomber, how many Gs are you really pulling? And since you're not usually gunning from the nose, even if you do pull a bunch of Gs and you black out, it's kind of okay that it takes a little while for the blackness to subside, because you're not trying to put guns on target. Usually if you're pulling a lot of Gs in a bomber, you're trying to get away from something. You're not chasing something else. Now, some of these airplanes like the A-20G, even the B-25 Mitchell that actually have forward-facing 50 caliber guns, maybe you do want to work on your G tolerance. But for so many of these planes in the tree, when I put bombers, the B-17, yeah, it can pull some Gs, but it's really not as important. And that G tolerance is actually a pretty expensive crew skill right there. So if I look at this crew that isn't maxed out, G tolerance costs 110 crew XP points, as opposed to leveling some of these other ones up that are cheaper. So you can save yourself a lot of wasted crew XP points on a bomber crew by ignoring G tolerance. You won't if it's the last thing that you have. I mean, there's no reason not to skill it up, but there are other ones here that are more important, in my opinion, including gunners. You want, this is important, that in your bomber tree, you want to have enough experienced gunners for the plane that requires the most. Now, more experienced gunners is an expensive crew skill. So, you'll have to decide whether you want to make that a priority or not. But try flying a B-17 with only one experienced gunner. It's not so good. So what I did for each of these factions is I went to some of the heavier bombers, and I'm looking down here. I guess I can't hover over it. Well, you can see down at the bottom, 8 turrets. This plane, to be optimized with gunners, needs a crew of 8. Besides the pilot, it needs 8 gunners. This other B-7, this is all the same. This B-17, that one has 9. So you're actually going to need 9. Now, you'll have those 9 gunners, and you won't need them for some of these other planes that don't have as many gunners. But once you get up to the B-17, you're going to thank yourself if you have that many gunners. The B-24 actually has 8. So what I did was I went through each faction in the tech tree, looked at how many turret gunners I'm going to need at the most for my bomber crew. and in this case it was 9. I have 10 now because I ran out of things to level up, so I went ahead and did that. But if you tend to let your AI gunners do most of the work, you're not a tail gunner, you don't hop in the seat, these are going to save you sometimes. Those tail gunners, waist gunners, turret gunners, they can make a big difference when somebody's chasing you. So don't neglect those on your bomber crew unless you really don't care and you normally take over the gunner's position yourself, because then these stats won't matter. But I like to have a full complement of experienced gunners with some skills, so when I'm on a bombing run, I can keep focused on the bombing run and where I'm going to put the bombs rather than who's chasing me and how can I shoot them down. Besides that, when I'm in the turret position or I'm in the tail gunner position, it's harder for me to maneuver the plane and shoot at the same time. So a lot of times I'll let my AI gunners take it over, and having these extra crew skills is definitely a good thing. Of course, the reload speed is important. Weapons maintenance, probably a lot less important for bombers than it is for fighter aircraft. The repair speed, probably not an issue, because generally I've found, at least in arcade battles, when I'm in a bomber, I'm not normally able to come back to base. People chase me up into the clouds where I'm base bombing or something, and they either completely disassemble my plane, set it on fire, and blow it into a million pieces, or they cripple it really badly to where I can't land it anyways, or I'm so high up there that I can't be bothered with taking it all the way back down to my air base. I'd rather just eject from the plane. Now, the repair speed and the repair rank will affect how fast your plane repairs in the hangar. But if you're like me and you're playing in arcade, those repair costs aren't particularly exorbitant anyways. So I would probably not skill these up quite as much for bomber crews if I was doing this again. Reload speed is important. Weapons maintenance, less so. Gunners, very important to me. It's going to depend on your style. I would ignore G tolerance altogether. These other things are nice to have, but some of these things are applicable to fighter crews, and some of them to bomber crews. Some of them not so much for that particular plane, and you can kind of step over this. So I like the fact that I have a dedicated bomber crew that has good reload time, a full complement of gunners for the turrets that it requires, a pilot with decent skills, and so forth. And there are different things for bomber crews that I value for my fighter crews. So in the stages of leveling up, it doesn't make any sense to just put these planes willy-nilly, because you're going to have to crew up everything to get the most out of your crews. So consider separating those into, it doesn't have to be how I did it, 3 fighters, heavy attacker / dive bomber, and then heavy bomber or level bomber. It doesn't have to be like that. If you're primarily into fighters, maybe it's 4 fighters and a bomber. If you only fly fighters, well, and you don't really care about the bombers, well, that's fine. Have 5 fighters. Hell, buy some more crew slots and get 9 fighters if that's all you want to play. You're supposed to have fun with the game, but for me, having fun with the game is flying a diverse number of aircrafts, diverse kinds of aircraft, and getting good at some of the different skills. So, like I say, I like to fly them all, so I like to have the crews here. Now, this is mainly because I am an arcade battle person. As I said, realistic battle people, that's actually having fewer crews benefits you more in realistic battles than it does in arcade battles, because you only get 1 plane for a realistic battle. So if you trained 1 crew on all your planes and you flew all your missions with 1 crew, all of your crew XP that you earn will help level up that crew a lot faster. I guess the question is, how many baskets do you want to put your eggs in? And if you're flying RB, realistic battles, I don't see a whole lot of sense into having many different crews and having your skills sort of spread across all those different crews. I took that lesson, and now that I'm getting into tanks, I'm applying that to tanks. But if you're an RB player, really, there's only 2 crew slots that you need. Of course, if you want the option of playing some arcade, you want some more crews to, have a lineup of planes and so forth, by all means, go ahead and do that. But I don't know why I would want to fly this crew out and then that crew and then this crew for different games. I want all my experience to help make this crew better so that the next time I fly out, I'm going to even be better equipped with better skills. So keep that in mind. I think, if you want to load it out with different crews, just try to do it smartly, I guess. It's going to take you longer to get your crews up to a certain level than if you have fewer crews. I like 5 as a magic number. As I said, it's because you can have 5 by only spending silver lions. You don't have to actually spend real money to get the rest of them. And besides that, because I'm an arcade player, if I die 5 times in an arcade match, I kind of feel like, yeah, I'm not doing so well. I think it's time to pack it up and reset. I refuse to throw more than 5 planes at one arcade battle. I mean, repair costs are down pretty reasonable, but still, I feel like, man, if I'm getting killed 5 times, I'm not doing something right. So I'd rather just, go back to hangar, regroup, change my plane lineup, take a break from the game, whatever it is that I need, because I really feel like I didn't do very well. Even if I got 20 kills, I still feel like, the way I fly and the way I play, the way I like to play, I would much rather have, 4 kills and 1 death, or 4 kills and 0 deaths, than 20 kills and 5 deaths. It's just the way I am. Everybody's going to be a little bit different on that, but I am generally a defensive player. My goal when I'm playing this game is trying not to die generally. So I think that pretty much covers it. We'll get into tank crews here in a little bit, but since I drive mostly in realistic tank mode rather than arcade tank mode, you'll find that my crews for Germany and Russia, I always have my tank in one crew. So I have one crew that is super skilled up, and then I don't even have tanks that go on these other crews. I could, but since I go into mainly realistic battle in tanks, I don't need it, because that's the only tank I'm going to be able to bring in. And now when we have mixed mode, I have a tank in this crew, and then I can have these 2 as fighter crews, this as dive bomber crew, and this as a bomber crew. So I still have a lot of diversity when I play tanks with Russia and Germany. And I think I use the crews more effectively that way. If I were an arcade tank player, I would probably still stick with the 5 crews, and I would have different tanks assigned to different crews. And I might even try to divvy them up by light tank, heavy tank, medium tank, and maybe some of those anti-aircraft guns, some of those flak guns that they have. Maybe I'd put all the flak guns on one, because if there are certain skills that those flak gunners need more so than some of the other types of tanks, you can use that to your advantage by putting only anti-aircraft guns on here. Or in arcade, maybe you always want to have, well, I guess in arcade you wouldn't use anti-aircraft guns mostly because they don't do mixed battle modes, at least not yet. So that pretty much covers my crew strategy. I hope you're able to glean something useful from it. If you're fairly new to the game, I think that using my strategy will help you a great deal over the course of time. But, if you have any suggestions, like I said, this is my first YouTube video, and I'm trying to find something that nobody's really talked about too much, something that people don't really think of a whole lot in the game, something valuable to everybody, whether you're a seasoned player or a new player. But I do think the new players are going to get the most out of this. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed it. I'm going to put some links in the description to some other really good crew videos that have been made by NTAC and Squirrel Nuts and a couple other people, I think. So you can watch those too. And they get into a little bit more of the specifics of each crew skill and what it does. But look for some more videos. from me in the future. Like I said, I think it'll mostly be arcade gameplay. I would appreciate a subscription, of course. I hope that you will. If you like this video, if you got something out of it, feel free to comment on it. If you disagree with me, feel free to leave that in the comments. But I hope you all enjoyed it, and look for my next video here sometime soon. Thanks very much.